Well, hi there, and welcome to another New Living Paradigms webinar. And today I'll be going through growing through jealousy. So before we roll, I offer sex and relationship guidance to men and women. I offer typically 3 or 6 month packages for substantial personal transformation. So if you're looking to change your life in any way and you think you'd like some guidance, I might be the person to help with you. And if you have any questions during the webinar, please send them through the chat window. So, why do this kind of work? Well, I'd like people to experience really good relationships and for them to be real ecstatic high in their life. I'd like people to avoid heartbreak. I want people to be seen in and not trapped in relationships. And this kind of work can also help you be more present in the moment. And it can help you to have deep, authentic relationships. And also relationship work's an opportunity to sort of remake yourself as well. And I'll be talking about that topic again, as I have in previous ones towards the end of this webinar. And there's a bigger effect of this relationship work in being a co-creator for a better world overall. So what makes up jealousy? Well, it's a fearful emotional reaction, and it's typically associated with the thoughts of losing a partner. I think this is kind of what distinguishes it from envy, which is where perhaps our partner's doing something that we like, or gone out somewhere nice, and we think, oh, actually, I'd quite like to be there, or I'd quite like to be doing that thing with him or her. But jealousy is usually associated with an insecurity about the relationship breaking down and losing your loved one. Jealousy is also associated with mate guarding behavior, which sounds kind of biological. There is a biological basis for jealousy. Mate guarding behavior can come out in all sorts of weird ways, passive aggressive or overtly aggressive, threatening the person that is perceived to be sort of courting your partner or connecting with your partner. Or it might be yourself, of course, if you're in the other side of the jealousy dynamic, not the jealous person. There's also a psychological component to it as well. And psychologists tend to talk about two different kinds of jealousy. Normal jealousy, which is more like a concern, perhaps a valid and proportionate response to your partner connecting with somebody else. And just a concern where you'll think, well, what does this mean for our relationship? And then there's abnormal jealousy, which is a mental condition where the person can be really violent, or they might respond in some very extreme way, which perhaps isn't measured and proportionate to the situation. So what does jealousy do? Well, it's a trigger, so it stimulates the primitive brain, and it indicates securities. Typically, because of the biological basis of this, it's a fear of losing the resources that the partner brings to the relationship. It can also re-traumatize people because of the psychological basis of this as well, particularly around issues like abandonment. It can trigger those deep feelings of insecurity, and if that process isn't handled well and compassionately, if it cascades into a partner withdrawing or becoming very angry or aggressive or something like that, then that can re-traumatize the person who's jealous, and then of course that can have some really unpleasant effects on that person, and could damage the relationship substantially, perhaps beyond the point of repair. So there we are. It can lead to arguments, violence, breakups, Can also lead to understanding and deeper connection. That's perhaps if the jealousy that's triggered is more the normal kind of jealousy. So it just raises a sort of questions and curiosity, and that could be processed in a healthy way and lead to more connection. And there's also something else here about personal evolution. So it could be a step up into something bigger. So I was kind of thinking about this and all these different kind of responses to jealousy. The abnormal jealousy, which is a very extreme triggering. Um, the sort of more normal jealousy, and then the fact that some people don't even seem to experience jealousy at all. This just seems quite unusual to me, but nevertheless, there are people around who really just don't get particularly jealous. And also, there's beyond that, there's some people who experience something which is called compersion, which is sort of the inverse of jealousy, where they actually, if a person sees their partner enjoying themselves, perhaps flirting or being flirted with by somebody else, they actually like it as long as their partner's enjoying it. It kind of adds to the relationship and makes it better. So this kind of doesn't make sense from a purely biological point of view. Biology ought to, if it was all genetic, then jealousy would just produce the same response, unless there could be some genes that sort of vary the response. So it's possible there is a bit more to this genetically, perhaps that we don't know about. But anyway, the conclusion is that jealousy is highly influenced by psychology. And of course, this means we can do work and it's amenable to change. So if things are tough and you're experiencing jealousy from either side of the equation, there's definitely stuff you can do about this. And of course, we're going to get on and do that a bit later. First, there's a little exercise here for you to try. And this is something I found by Kathy Morelli. And it's about the insecure attachment style. So I've said part of jealousy is the psychological element, and that I think is a very large part of the whole sort of phenomena around jealousy. And if your early years were a bit challenging and you didn't have a good connection with your early caregivers, this can really make jealousy a lot worse. And sometimes there can be a piece of work to do around this, perhaps some counselling or something like that. So anyway, here we go. If you've got a notepad or a bit of pen and paper ready, I'll read them out. Do you have pervasive feelings of emptiness or lack of self-worth? How was your relationship with your early caregivers? So maybe just think of one or two words that immediately come into your head there. And yeah, be really brutal about this kind of stuff and very honest. So like, don't say normal or average or something like that. Actually describe the experience. Was the atmosphere in your home warm and loving sometimes, but also critical? And again, be very brutally honest about this. Was there any kind of criticism, even, and be aware of things like passive aggressive and sarcastic? Were you raised in a repressive atmosphere? So that could be well, it could be all sorts of things, like for example, some kind of religious cult comes to mind. If you went to an average state school or even a boarding school, you may have been exposed to a very repressive atmosphere. Something to think about. Anyway, make some notes on that one. And also, were your early caregivers unreliable? So did they maybe say, "Oh, I'll pick you up after school today," and then not turn up? Or did they perhaps not offer you comfort sometimes when you were upset? Maybe they ignored you? So there you go. Just have a read through those, have a look at your answers, and see if you want to add anything. And I think if you've sort of written down anything at all negative there to those 5 questions, if there's anything in there that's not sort of glitter and gold and very genuine glitter and gold about your caregiver experience as a child, then that's possibly an area to look at as to why jealousy might be a problem for you. Now, of course, one of the typical responses when we feel jealous is to become possessive of our partners and to sort of want to ring fence them in and protect them from connecting with other people. And the other side of this is that people who have been stung by sort of a trigger of jealousy can need a lot of reassurance and then devotion and fidelity from their partner, as Nando Pelusi says there. And really, this doesn't help the situation. It makes the relationship very constrictive, and it's really about becomes about managing the problem and not solving the problem. And of course, this can make things worse. So what can you do if you feel jealous? Well, it's integrating some of the work I did on the previous webinar about triggering, practice body awareness, notice what you feel in your body, take a deep breath, and describe the experience as you have it. So you can speak this aloud, or if you're on your own, you can just think about it. So be present in your body and in the moment, and because triggering is about flashbacks, you may get pulled back into some old scenario, and it's very interesting when I've had these. They've come from, I think, pre-verbal experiences of my past. So there isn't the sort of the words or the emotional symbols available to work with. So it can be quite like an unconscious thing and quite difficult, like a really dark mass to process that kind of jealousy. But what really helps is staying in your body. And after you've sort of gone through the process of feeling the jealousy, it's a good idea to reflect on your experience. So go over it in your mind and what happened, and you can also do journaling. And also, movement can help you to work through these emotions that you get afterwards, like dance, exercise, whatever you like. And then, of course, you can have a talk with your partner. And it's not a good idea generally to attempt to process or work through things as you're having difficult feelings. It's in general, I think, much better to sort of step back and have your feelings, work through them, and then when you've got calm again and back into your sort of rational mind, then you can process through it with your partner. And there's a note there about the partner needing to listen. So there's a need for empathy and these other skills around having good communications, which really ought to be part of your relationship toolbox. So there we go. It's a little exercise. So just close your eyes, take a deep breath, and go back in time to a moment where you were perhaps experiencing jealousy, a particular point in time. You probably have a fairly good memory of this, and just feel into your body and go back in and get a sense of what it was like in your body, and how did it feel? How extreme was the feeling? And then write some notes, do a little bit of journaling right now. Give yourself something to look back at later. And then you've heard a little bit about the normal and the abnormal jealousy. Perhaps you'd like to sort of self-score yourself there. Was your jealousy sort of proportionate and reasonable and measured given the situation that triggered it? Or perhaps it was a bit more extreme, in which case you might want to put yourself in the abnormal category. But don't feel any shame about that. There's nothing wrong with any of this. It's all the kind of things to expect depending on whatever your previous experiences are. And then notice, have a look through the notes and what you've written, and ask yourself: did you compare yourself to somebody? Was there that comparison? Like, was he taller? Was he fitter than me? Or did she have nicer hair? Or was she better looking than me? Is she taller? Does she have bigger boobs, smaller boobs? All of that kind of stuff. So maybe make a note of any of that if you had it, and give the details. So what exactly is it about yourself that you're insecure about? And then, did you feel like you were in a competition? So, did you feel moved to improve yourself or change yourself, or talk down about this other person's qualities that you may have felt were superior to yours? And then, of course, and I guess this is kind of inevitable. Ask yourself the question: are you afraid of being abandoned or replaced? That's the typical thing that really identifies your response as a jealousy response. So, a, uh, a sort of three step, and each step's a big piece of work in its own right. But these are three foundations for managing jealousy and moving through it. So, practice self-esteem, and I'll briefly come on to that and these other points in a moment. Build relational esteem. So you can also have your relationship can also have an esteem basis to it, because a relationship's like another personality. You each have your own personalities and the relational personality as well, and that can have qualities of esteem around it. And finally, this is the thing that really gets you through jealousy, and that's becoming become irreplaceable by becoming unique. So, working on becoming a sort of singular person. So, first, the self-esteem. I won't go into this in detail. You can read about it elsewhere. These are the 6 pillars of self-esteem by Nathaniel Branden. The practice of living consciously. So, are you just sort of living day to day, hour to hour, or do you have a sort of a higher purpose in life? Are you present and aware of what's going on, or are you sort of in this sort of autopilot process of getting up in the morning, your a morning routine, driving to work, doing your job, getting home, putting the TV on, blah blah blah. Um, that's the autopilot. Or the other thing, do you get home and do you ask your partner, hey, how are you? What should we do tonight? And so on and so forth. That would be a conscious living. Practice of self-acceptance. That's being able to look at yourself and observe the parts of you that you think you could change and improve, and taking action on those. But looking at the things that you're never going to change. I'm never going to be a basketball player or something like that. I just have to accept that. So practice accepting the things about yourself that you can't change. The practice of self-responsibility, I think that's kind of self-explanatory. Accepting responsibility for the things that you choose in your life. The practice of self-assertiveness, that's all about deciding who you are and what you will and won't accept, and being proactive in making sure those things happen. The practice of living purposefully, so having something more than just getting through the day as the focus of your life, living towards or for something that you feel passionately about, doing your thing basically. and the practice of personal integrity. And I have my own definition of this. For me, integrity is where what you say, what you think, and what you do are all consistent, all speak to the same truth. So there's some aspects of these pillars of esteem that can be applied to the sort of persona of the relationship itself. So is the relationship um, uh, being kept consciously? Do you have agreements about your expectations and what you want to do with each other, how you want to be with each other, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable? And as with you as a individual, there may be aspects of the relationship dynamic that you have to accept. For example, you've dated somebody that's perhaps not as physically fit as you'd like, and for some reason, perhaps they can't be as physically fit as you like. Maybe they have a disability or something, and you have to be an acceptance around that in your relationship, and not pretending that it's something that's going to change, and sort of keeping yourself in that relationship, not accepting that part of your partner, and of course the dynamic that that creates in the relationship. The practice of asserting relational boundaries. So if you've developed a conscious relationship and you have certain boundaries, are you turning up and helping to maintain those boundaries around your relationship? If you've had an agreement with your partner that you're not going to have, for example, sarcasm in your relationship, if there's some sarcasm, did you assert that relational boundary? And are you doing that? Practice of maintaining the relationship purpose. So this is really a part of an ongoing process of being in a conscious relationship. Relationships go through phases and evolve to different spaces. And are you working on retaining the relationship purpose, and having goals and being conscious around that? And also the practice of keeping relationship integrity. So again, as with the personal, so with the relationship, you'll have ideas about what behaviours, how you talk, and what you do. Are you turning up and keeping those in integrity with what's been agreed? And of course, all these are all responsibilities for both parties in a relationship. It can't be a relationship when only one side's turning up to do this stuff. So all of that stuff's going to the self-esteem, and the relational self-esteem is really going to create a nice strong foundation for your relationship, and it's going to give you a springboard to taking things to the next level. And if we look at stages of personality development, as children, we're really very good emulators, and we soak up what's being modeled to us, what's being said to us, and we replicate the behaviors. And this is just what goes on in a normal, healthy childhood, and it helps to keep us safe as well. Following the cultural traits that we're exposed to kind of keeps us in with the tribe, which is safe for a child. But then hopefully through adolescence, we go through this sort of differentiation process where we kind of get into our own thing. We try to find our identity. For me, I sort of got into some bands, and then I sort of got into heavy metal, and I got into hanging out with bikers and going to biker rallies. And so that's all about trying to differentiate yourself from the crowd, and having some identity, and trying to look different from other people. And then finally, we can get into a deeper process of reconstructing who we are, where we're not looking for these different sort of things to pull off the shelf to make up sort of a concrete identity. And we're really looking a bit deeper at challenging the cultural norms and programming that we've received and that we are surrounded by, and we start to ask deeper questions about who we want to be and what we want to do with our lives. So, just a quick note about trying to increase your sort of, as I say, market value or something like that in the relationship. Maybe you might do it by being tough and going to the gym, or you might be like a whiz in the kitchen, or you might be like, you've made yourself the best lover. These physical qualities are all things where you can be compared to somebody else. And of course, there's always the risk and almost inevitability that at some point your partner will turn up and connect with somebody that is better in some way. So if your game is about superior physical qualities, basically it's a losing game. In the long run, somebody's going to come along that is perceived to be better in one of these things, and then if jealousy is triggered, it's like a no-win. It's a guaranteed loser. And yeah, the same thing applies to sort of emotional qualities as well. About if you are trying to develop a really friendly persona, or if you're a really sort of jocular and humorous person, and or maybe you're like really romantic and you're really focusing on buying meals out and maybe some poetry or whatever. But unfortunately, at some point your partner's going to bump into somebody who's just like a real dab hand and a natural and better than you. So again, emotional qualities that you might develop, as with physical qualities, can always be compared, and therefore you're comparable, and therefore you get into the possible dynamic of feeling less than. So it's not going to help you with jealousy to do this kind of development. So what can you do instead? You want to start working on being the authentic expression of yourself, the best expression of yourself. And this process really begins with understanding the depth of your social conditioning and questioning your behaviors, your beliefs, your thoughts, your actions. How much of that stuff was just handed to you on a plate and absorbed and is being reproduced in your behavior. So that's the first step in this process. Then you need to move on, once you understand some of this and have worked through it, into trying to discover your own values, and look at those times in your life, perhaps when you were alone. What did you do? What did you think? What did you like? What rang most true for you? What are you passionate about in your own time? Then, in this sort of process of development, you need to be assertive about these values, because as we start to pull ourselves outside of the boundaries of the tribe or the peer experience, people find that a challenge when you're starting to move into the more deeper adult phase of your personal development. They find it a challenge when you don't do what they want to do and when you don't believe what they believe. And again, this is a time for self-esteem work and for being assertive and to sticking to who you are and protecting that. And once you're kind of feeling comfortable and secure around that, then you can start to look at discovering your life purposes. So taking those values and things and saying, well, is there something higher in this? Is there some goal, something that I want to achieve in my life? What do I want to do before I die? What will say to me on my deathbed? I've done the right thing in my life. I've lived my life purpose. The next step, once you get an inkling around what that is to create the projects that will realize your life purposes. So you need to start actually practically organizing your life, making the changes to your life that will lead you to have achieved success with those life purposes. And this is the kind of work that a life coach would help you with, and also my transformational guidance. And of course, then you have to go away and live your life projects and integrate these purposes in sort of the grander scheme of your life and make them happen. And we're starting to come to an end now. Authentic relationships emerge from uniqueness. When love arises from the appreciation of each other's singularity, rather than from qualities or characteristics many people have, there is no basis for comparison or competition, and no danger of replacing one love partner with another. And that's from James Park, who has some excellent material on this. So really that just summarizes what the point is in having the life projects and a purpose, and really becoming the singular expression of who you deeply feel you need to be. And that's it really. That's what's going to help you to not be jealous. So that's it for this webinar. I do hope you've enjoyed it and got something great out of it. And of course, if you've got questions or anything you want to ask, you can always bring them up. Email me or post under this video. It's going to go out on YouTube, of course. So leave your comments. And thank you for listening. Bye for now.